Welcome to Community Forum, a community service of CAN TV. I'm your host, Juan Carlos Hernandez. Carl Sandburg, Saul Bellow, Richard Wright, and Sandra Cisneros gave voice to their Chicago. But what do new literary voices say about our city? This September, new writers will have some time to have their say at the second Chicago Writers Conference. Joining me to talk about it, we have Mare Swallow, the founder and executive director of Chicago Writers Conference, Ines Bellina, a conference program assistant, and Samantha Hoffman, an award-winning author. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming out. Let's start out by talking about the history of the conference. It's 2 years, but yes, that's history already. So how was it born? Who helped, and how many late nights did you have to put up with?
Oh, wow. So in 2011, I actually created a one-day creativity conference with my friend Neil Gorman. We had actually met through podcasting, and Neil said to me one day, "Why aren't there podcasting conferences in Chicago? Do you want to do one?" And we thought to open it up more to creativity of all types, not just podcasting. So we had a one-day conference called Creator Camp. It was held in a bar, and it attracted a healthy audience, but what was interesting was there were only writers and artists there. And the feedback we got was, "I want more of this. Why aren't there more days like this? Why can't I meet more authors like this?" And I had also for a long time wanted to attend a writers conference in Chicago, because when I did look into other writers conferences, even the closest one, which is in Muncie, Indiana, was going to cost me about $1,000 to $2,000 out of my own pocket to attend.
Wow.
So I thought, well, I'll create a conference. I had fun doing Creator Camp, so I'll make the Chicago Writers Conference. We ran a successful Kickstarter campaign to get our startup funds, and I had also been working for a city program called Chicago Publishes, where I worked with authors and writers and publishers in Chicago and who were visiting Chicago, and I just started asking people, will you speak? And our first conference was held actually at the Tribune Tower. We had some donated space, and we're able to bring authors, editors, publishers, and agents together to talk to writers for 2.5 to 3 days. And I also started it because I wanted to meet some agents and editors and publishers myself for my own work. So that's how it was born, and 2012 was our first Chicago Writers Conference.
And how many people came to that conference, and what was the response like?
Oh, the response was great. It was slow building because we were new, so I think a lot of people didn't know about us, or sometimes when something's new and unproven, I think the sentiment is kind of, oh, I've never heard of that before, I'm not going to, why should I go to that? What if that's something weird or it's bad? But our response actually was really good. It built over time, and we sold out with 200 attendees.
200 attendees?
Yes.
That first year?
Their first year.
And you spread the word. How do you spread the word about the conference? Ines is part of this, spreading the word?
Ines is, yes.
Yes. So I mostly deal with the social media aspect of the conference. We have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter account, a blog, and a newsletter. And we use all of those outlets to promote the conference. We have sent, our information to local presses so that they can help spread the word. But I think right now what's been most effective is just really engaging with our audience, with the people who follow us, with the people who've liked our Facebook page, and try to give them something useful while they wait for the conference.
Yeah.
And Samantha, how did you become a part of the conference? Is this your first year volunteering?
It is.
Okay.
I found out about the conference last year, I think on the Chicago Writers Association website, which we're affiliated with. And I was excited because it was a conference in Chicago, and like Mare said, there aren't any. So, and I make it a point to go to at least one conference every year. So when I saw it was right here in Chicago, I was very excited. And it was amazing to me what she did. She just decided to create this conference, and she did it, and it was fantastic. And so I talked to her last year and said, next year I want to be involved, and here I am.
How awesome. What I'm hearing from you is that we don't have, and you said it, we don't have enough of this in Chicago. Is this the first time we have a Chicago Writers Conference, or do you know the history of any conferences like that in this city?
I do. We have, well, first I'll say Chicago is an amazing literary city.
Right,
we have, there are over 50 reading series, most of them free in the city, in Spanish and English. You and I were talking about this. We have just this amazing literary community. Everyone's very supportive, the educational programs we have. And then we have things like Printers Row Lit Fest, which is a festival with books and some author talks or talks from other people. Columbia College puts on Story Week, which focuses on stories. And even though those are great places to go and hear about writing, what makes us different is you can actually get up close and get some time to listen to or meet editors and agents and publishers who will tell you kind of the business side of things. We're not all business. We have some fun workshops, craft workshops. We offer events throughout the year, which I can tell you about later. But this is a chance when you can sit down and listen to an agent talk for a half an hour on here's what I'm looking for, here's what I'm not, and here's the best way to approach me. And same thing from publishers. And then we've also opened it up to include social media experts and content experts so they can talk about how to better write your blog or promote yourself online.
So it gives you the tools, it gives you, some tools, or at least the introduction to the tools. In this changing, it's been changing for the past 15, 20 years, this changing world of publishing, how have Chicago writers responded through social media and through blogs and become part of the Writers' Conference?
Let me make sure I understand the question. How have writers responded to things becoming more virtual and online? I'm going to kick that over to my two writers here.
Okay.
Well, what I've seen a lot is that you can no longer be the author that just hides away in the lake, like in a cabin in the lake, writes his or her stuff, and then disappears into the night. For better or for worse, authors are now expected to promote themselves. Part of it is just change in the industry. There isn't the budget for promotion that there used to be.
That's true.
And part of it is that authors actually have their own outlets now. And so I follow a lot of writers in Chicago on Twitter and some of the Facebook pages. And the great thing about it, though, is that they not only they're not only focused on saying you can buy my book here or this is where I'll be, but they are really interested in fostering a community, even if it's a virtual one, through blogs and their own Twitter feeds and things like that.
And it is a great way to connect with other authors, not just in the Chicago area, but and writers of all kinds, and agents and publishers as well. The online community is terrific, and people are very supportive. And I've met a lot of people from all around the country that I've eventually met in person. So it's a great way to connect.
By supportive, what do you mean?
Offering suggestions about how to promote your work, or events to go to, or book signings, booksellers who are really interested in promoting authors, that kind of thing. And the authors that I've met will promote my work on their social media and doing blog tours, that kind of thing. So lots of opportunity.
And this virtual world we're speaking of, you also, you have workshops. Can you give me a little more detail about those types of workshops at the Writers' Conference?
Sure. Well, we have the conference has panels and talks, and then the workshops, we offer 4 workshops throughout the year. We'll probably increase that in 2014.
So just to make sure I'm understanding correctly,
sure.
The conference is primarily panel discussion? It's
2 things. We have one room that has panel discussions in it all day, or all days of the conference, and then we have speakers in another room.
Okay.
So when I say we offer workshops throughout the year, those are separate events that are smaller. We cap them at 20 people or fewer, and that's when you get to work one-on-one with another expert. So for instance, last night we actually just had a workshop called Shine Through the Slush. When editors get submissions that they didn't solicit, that's called the slush pile. And we actually had an editor from a literary magazine come and tell them, teach the writers, how do you write a letter so that an editor notices you and actually takes your submission out of the slush pile. So that's an example of a workshop. Something else that came out of each year we've had a conference. writers always want more financial and legal information. So we actually have a legal expert, an arts legal expert speaking at this year's conference. But in January, we had a Taxes for Writers workshop. So things that really help writers with kind of like the business end of their writing, whether it's getting it out there or doing your taxes. Those are some of the workshops we offer.
So you're helping writers look for loopholes.
No comment?
If I could just add something
Sure.
to that,
Go
one
ahead.
of the reasons why I got involved was precisely because of that kind of information. Like I have a somewhat of a good idea of my craft, of what I need to do to improve, of places I can go to, make my writing better. But I have absolutely no idea of what taxes I would need to pay or how to write a query letter. And these are things that writers need in order to get their work published. It is still a business, and that was my main interest in getting involved with the conference.
Okay. One of the things you mentioned at the very beginning is this community, this growth of community of writers, and how there was this thirst for it, right?
Yeah.
And you also said that Chicago is very rich as far as literary events, but if there's this thirst and there's a wealth on the other side, what is not clicking there? I'm switching gears a bit, not talking necessarily about the conference, but
Sure.
Chicago's literary world. Why is there such a disconnect between that wealth and that thirst?
I don't know if there's a disconnect. I think maybe, not everyone has discovered the wealth that we have here. One thing, and maybe this is, Juan Carlos, where you're coming from, and I'll ask for you two to give input too. Another reason I created the conference, I'm going to be very blunt here, and I hope I can say this on cable access. It pisses me off that the publishing world, that the national media sees us as flyover country. Okay, Tina Fey lived here and did Second City here. She didn't stop here on her Bossy Pants book tour, okay? We are a damn important city, okay? We are a great city. And like what Samantha said about authors being supportive, not just online, when I started the conference and we were getting our startup funds, I wrote to Ian Belknap, who runs Write Club, who met me in passing once and said, "Will you help me?" And he's like, "Yes, of course I will." And he's still one of our biggest cheerleaders.
Wow.
So we have this amazing, rich literary culture, literary events. I just want more people to see it and know it and come take advantage of it. Because I'll invite friends from college or work colleagues. I'll invite them out to a reading, and they'll say, "Wow, I've never heard of this." And at the end of the night, they're like, "Wow, this is amazing. I love this." What do you two have to say?
I don't think people know about this rich community here. I mean,
Right.
I'm published 1 year, so it's not like I have a vast experience in this area, but I didn't know about all the reading series that go on in the
Right.
city and this wonderful community of writers until I got into it and really started exploring. So I think the conference will bring all that to light. I think people know more about the writing community after going to the conference.
Yeah, and just to kind of follow up on that. So before I moved to Chicago, I lived in New York for 5 years, which is, one of the center of publishing here in the States. And when I moved here, I'm like, well, I guess I'll just have to, send all my stuff over to New York, and that's what I'm going to be forced to do. And it was only when I started seeking out other writers here that I realized it's not really necessary. It's just one of those things that on the coast you don't hear about it. Even like I was just so surprised to hear and listen or to read about writers that I love that were actually based in Chicago, but that kind of information is completely glossed over if they get any sort of national recognition. And the great thing about the community here is that everyone is supportive and wants you to succeed as much as they want themselves to succeed, which is something that I found lacking in New York.
Okay, I guess we're a scrappy bunch of writers here.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're gonna I want to take a look at some pictures from last year's conference and see a few images of what was going on, some of the speakers, and feel free to fill me in if you would, Mare
Sure.
and Ines or Samantha, if you attended last year, right?
I did, yes.
Please feel free to describe and talk about your experiences there and what we're seeing
Sure.
on the screen.
This is one of our workshops that is separate from the conference. This was called Novel Submission 101, and it was led by Holly McDowell. She's the author of the King Solomon's Wives series, and she has a very interesting path. She tried to go the traditional publishing route and eventually was picked up by a digital publisher, but she's had experience with both traditional and digital publishing. So she taught a workshop on how to prepare your novel for submission and how to write an effective query letter so that an agent who represents fiction would pick up your novel. So yeah, that was one of our workshops. Oh, this was one of the social events after the conference.
After the conference.
Can I say we go drinking afterwards?
Yes, yes. Yeah, writing and drinking do go together.
They do go together.
They do.
Yes, and most of our events are at bars afterwards, which Samantha was at. If they're not at bars,
certainly was.
there is wine.
There is Samantha.
This is a panel discussion at the conference. I'm trying to see who's in there. It's
I think
Ian.
we have a close-up that follows right after this.
Yeah, I think Ian might have been moderating.
Okay. Can you make
Yeah.
that?
No. Ian was on it.
Ian's
This
on
is
the left.
this was a good one. Mark Baser is moderating. Mark is the host of the interview show. He's all the way over to the right if you're looking at the screen. And what you see here, this is Megan Steelstra from Second Story, Ian Belknap from Right Club, Kathy Bergquist from Sappho's Salon, and Koya Paz from Proyecto Latina?
Proyecto Latina.
Proyecto Latina, thank you. And these are all people who run and host live lit series. So this was kind of what Samantha was talking about. This was a panel on how to join the Chicago literary scene. How do you find readings and how do you get to be a part of them? That's what they were discussing.
Okay. And
this was one of our social media talks.
Okay.
So this is a good example of a difference between a panel discussion and a talk. This is where we have a single speaker. The speaker in this case, she's up to the left of the screen. Her name's Kedra Cheney. She runs a few blogs, has her own business, teaching social media, and she was teaching our writers how to use social media to good effect.
Okay.
This was another evening event, also at a bar. Another award-winning author, Patricia Ann McNair. She's the author of The Temple of Air. She was actually reading a personal essay at our Saturday evening reading series. And that's something else, if I can say, Juan Carlos, about our events. Something else I really wanted to differentiate. It bothered me that when there were certain events at the city or certain colleges will sometimes have little writing conferences or get-togethers,
Yes.
but they only let the teachers read at the evening events. If people are coming to learn this stuff and they want to put that work out there, come on, read at our series. And Samantha is actually our curator for our series this year.
Okay.
And I'll let her talk about that. She's actually curating where people who attend the conference can read their stuff.
Okay.
And the books you saw were books for sale.
Books for sale, and then because other tools for writers, right?
There are other tools for writers, but then also the authors who we have speak, like one will be Samantha this year, they get to sell their books at our conference.
So tell us about you were the curator for.
I am. This
You
year,
are the curator,
I am
sorry.
the curator this year, and it will be much like it was last year. It'll be at a local bar. I've forgotten the name of Brando's, and it'll be the day Saturday evening from 5 to 7:30. And so I'm taking submissions now from attendees of the conference, and they will read an excerpt from their work, 5 to 7 minutes. And we'll have some great work. We had some great work last year, and I'm sure we'll have more this year.
Tell me how you go about, I guess, touching on that, on the curating of works. How do you go about selecting the presenters and the panelists for the conference?
For the conference?
Yes.
Because, I'll let Samantha talk about the reading series. That's separate. So for the conference, I'm just trying to think how much I want to say because here's what I'll tell you. I have been, dipping my fingers into the Chicago literary scene for a few years, and I did work with Chicago publishers before. So it's kind of just an amalgam of what does our audience want to hear and who can teach that or speak to it. So, for instance, writing good blog content, writing good online content. I reached out to Andy Crestodina, who is a content expert and owns a web design company in Chicago, and just said, will you come and speak for us? And that's really, how it happens, is we really look at what our audience wants. A year before we put on the first conference, we actually sent out a market research survey to over 300 writers, ages 25 and above, who were serious writers and working writers, asking them, what else do you want to learn? And, we kind of take the pulse of what our audience wants, and then we seek out the people who are going to be a good fit for that, and who have some credibility and some goods to bring.
Okay.
I'm also really picky on, I want dynamic speakers. I mean, you can be the smartest writer, the most successful writer, but if you're boring, I don't want you there.
Right, it's not just a conference for speaking, it's also, I guess, in some sense, a form of entertainment. People want...
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
People want that. Well, I would like for you to talk about the curating, but I'm more interested in hearing from your novel and giving us just some background on what inspired it, the writing process, how many edits you went through, and then we could hear from you.
My novel, What More Could You Wish For, is inspired from my life, and it's dedicated to my father. And it's the story of a woman who's on the cusp of her 50th birthday, and she reconnects online with her high school sweetheart on the same day her significant other proposes. But it's more the story, it's not a romance novel, it's the story of her relationship with her family, and she's at a crossroad in her life where a family tragedy causes her to reevaluate what she wants for the second chapter of her life. And it's sort of based on an incident that happened in my life and the death of my father. So that's why it's dedicated to him. And so I started the story, I started writing the novel after he died and after a year of making big mistakes in my life because I was grieving, and I got married during that year before my father was dead a year, and it was a big mistake, and so that's sort of the genesis of the story. So it took me 8 years to write the book. Wow. Now I was working during that time and traveling, and I was writing it and editing and writing and editing, and I'm a serial editor, so it's really hard for me not to edit as I go. But I finished it after about 8 years, and then I said, I have to be done with it. And I decided, and I had been trying to get an agent interested during that time, and I have lots of rejection letters. I got some good comments, some positive comments, which kept me going. But ultimately, I decided I was going to be 80 before I could get it published, so I self-published. And then after promoting it myself, I got a book deal from St. Martin's Press.
Okay, well let's hear from it. We're running a bit short on time, so let's hear as much as we can. And if I interrupt you, I'll apologize in advance.
This is in the beginning of the book, and my main character Libby has seen her high school sweetheart online, but now she's going out to dinner with her significant other. Michael seized a piece of sushi with chopsticks and popped it into his mouth. "Raw fish, good," he said in his best caveman voice. While we waited for our dessert, Michael told me about his new listings and a high-maintenance client he'd just started. I admired his dedication, I really did, but he always gave me more details than my attention span had room for. So now I nodded and smiled and thought about Patrick Harrison, wondering what he was doing now. I was in the middle of doing the depressing math on how long ago it had been since I'd seen Patrick, when the waitress brought 2 tulip-shaped glass dishes, each containing a perfect scoop of green tea ice cream. Mine had a sparkler twinkling in the middle. "Happy birthday," she and Michael said in unison. I braced myself for them to break into an off-key rendition of the song and let out a relieved breath when they didn't. I pulled out the sparkler and we both dug in, remarking how yummy it was, how cold and creamy. And then Michael put down his spoon, reached into his pocket, and placed a small velvet box in front of me. I blinked. "Open it," he said, pushing it closer. I had a bad feeling. It was surely a ring, but hopefully it was a cocktail ring or even a mood ring. The waitress and 2 busboys stood watching from a respectful distance, grinning like kids with a new Game Boy. "Go on," Michael said. What could I do? Refuse? So while everyone watched, I gingerly lifted the little lid, and there, like a searchlight, sat an enormous diamond ring. The waitress clapped her little hands together. "Will you marry me, Libby?" Marry him? Really? I studied his face, hoping he was kidding, but he watched me eagerly. What was he thinking? 50% of all marriages fail, not to mention 100% of mine. My God, Michael, it's huge, I said. What I wanted to say was, what the hell, Michael? If you wanted to get married, couldn't we have talked about it privately instead of turning it into a spectacle? How could I wear this, I said. It's bigger than my fist. He laughed. You shouldn't have bought this. I'm too old for an engagement ring. I don't want to marry you either, I thought. I noticed then that the only sound in the restaurant was the faint clanking of dishes from the kitchen. I looked around to find 5 or 6 tables of patrons watching me. Put it on, Michael said. I hesitated. Go ahead. I took it out of the box, made a show of it being too heavy to lift, and Michael and our little audience laughed. Well, he said, will you? I held up my hand and made another show of being blinded by the glitter. When in doubt, play to the crowd. I was just stalling, of course, trying to think what to do, trying to think of how to kill Michael in front of all these witnesses. How could I not want to marry a man who would buy a ring like this, I said. Not a yes, I reasoned, an answer I could explain away later when I told him what I really meant was no.
We're going to have to stop you right there, but it's good. It's really good, and then leave it on a suspenseful note there. How can, before we're pretty much almost done here, how can we encourage more writing in our city, just to finish up?
Come to the conference.
Come to the conference.
Meet other writers.
Okay.
And
Ines?
Yes, I would say reach out to other writers. I was so scared to do so, but now that I have, I feel like, my career is taking off.
Great.
I just echo what they say. I got to tell you, I've seen from people who've attended the conference, people who had let their writing drop for years, they got right back into it, and one of our attendees was picked up at a reading series like in 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah, so I talk to other writers, get with other writers, take classes, talk to other writers.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mare, Ines, Samantha, for coming out and sharing this with us. Community Forum is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-738-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune into Community Forum for local issues and concerns every Saturday at 7 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Thanks for watching.